Mm-hmm.
We're now recording the podcast, and it is not got a monitor.
Mm-hmm.
So, put that there. Is that going to knock yours over?
No, it's just I don't want to get anything on it.
Oh, I don't want to block your marble mug. I'm going to put it over here. Okay. I'm going to feed it underneath.
Can I move?
Right. How's that sound?
Think I can move for a second?
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
I just want to grab some tissues and just.
All right, welcome to a very special live cast. This is the first time that Mark and I have ever been in the same room recording the podcast. So for those of you who have listened and marveled at the stellar audio quality, that is thanks to our editor, who will remain nameless.
Oh, yeah.
They do a great job, and we're grateful for their work, but they're just very humble.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we wanted to wish you guys a Merry Christmas. We have our hats on, and we are here in Kansas City, Missouri, kind of where it all began. We shared this room for
Not
16
yeah,
years?
probably 16, 17 years.
15 years.
15.
Because I got married in 15
Oh, right.
and moved into my own house. And we moved into this house in 2000.
Right,
We shared
yeah.
a room the whole
Mhm.
time. So, 15 years in here. Many creative brainstorming sessions happened.
Mm-hmm.
Many story times. And so we're just happy to kind of go back to our roots for this first live cast. Excited to have it on video also. There's a couple cameras going, which we're trying to get real high tech with it. So, but we're going to just kind of get right into the podcast today. I thought Mark and I would give our thoughts on two movies we saw recently.
Mm-hmm.
We have hot chocolate. We have snacks. And we are ready to go. Mark, the first movie that we're going to talk about is Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
I know you have a lot to say about it, so go right ahead.
Okay. Well, I thought I'd talk about for a second just the story, because as soon as I watched it, I read a lot of things online because I've been avoiding reading anything.
Right.
And people were just...
Before you go any farther, for those of you who haven't seen Star Wars, if you
Yes.
haven't seen Star Wars, spoiler alert.
Mhm.
I hate to say it, but we are going to discuss some key things. So if you haven't seen Star Wars, skip ahead to about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So.
And if we're still talking, then plug your ears.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I just want to talk about it for a second. I read a lot of just negative things online where people were just yelling and ranting about how bad the movie was and just what they didn't like about it. So I thought, well, that's kind of been done to death. Everyone's kind of given their opinion. There's a general consensus from the haters about what elements they didn't like. But I thought that I would put my thinking cap on, Christmas edition, and would take a second to talk about how it could have ended. Like, maybe instead of just ranting about it, maybe say, okay, if I was maybe the writer, here's a way that I could have used the building blocks that the film had and then put it together in a little bit of a different way that could have maybe satisfied more fans. So I hate being just negative for negative's sake without any constructive about it, but that's my nature and I hate it when I do that. So I just thought I'd talk for a little bit about that. So I thought that the film had some great setups. It had some great imagery. Like, one of my favorite shots was when Rey looked over the edge and there was the X-Wing in the water.
Yeah.
And that was one of those shots, just fleeting glances, and I was like, whoa, that's a setup. That's going to come back later. And what I wanted to happen was during the end fight where they were on the Salt Planet, I wanted Luke to come back in that X-Wing because it was the perfect setup. And it was a callback to the original series in which the X-Wing is sunk in the water. So here's my little take on how it could have ended. So, the return from Yoda was the perfect opportunity for this. Luke is at that turning point where he doesn't know what he's going to do. So Yoda comes back and he uses the X-Wing to get Luke back to his roots. He tells them that because Luke's whole thing is that the age of the Jedi is over. So Yoda tells him, remember, the age of the Jedi had ended before, when you first began your journey. It was just me and Obi-Wan, and there were no Jedi. It wasn't us anymore. So it's ended before, and yet we came back because we are worth it. So he said, the age of the Jedi had ended before when Luke began his journey. and that was when the Jedi were defeated by Sidious. So he tells him that it was Luke only defeated Sidious with the help of Ben Kenobi, Yoda, and Darth Vader in all actuality. So tell him that, look, you were once someone that was weak in the Force, and you needed someone that was stronger to help you on your journey. 3 mentors. You had 3 mentors that helped you defeat Sidious. And just like that, you are now the mentor that needs to help Rey defeat Sidious, because you're all she's got. You and Leia are the only 2 people that she has. And so if Yoda would have given that speech rather than burn the Jedi text, no one cares. If he had given that speech, that would have emboldened Luke, and Yoda could have made a quip about lift the ship from the water now, something like that, where he could have this is just like old times. And so Luke would have lifted the ship from the water. He would have flown in right when they were out of time in an X-Wing, being one of the greatest pilots of all time.
Yeah.
He could have flown in, helped rescue the fleet, and then land his ship in the hangar where the command ship, basically Snoke's command ship, and then him and Rey would have had this amazing face-off with Snoke and Kylo Ren, because Kylo Ren is softening up to Rey. He's getting to that point where he's like, oh, maybe we can work this out. But then Luke shows up, and there's that automatic animosity.
Right.
You tried to kill me.
That they set up through the whole film.
That they've set up. So he shows up, and all of a sudden, Kylo Ren is back where he just wants to defeat. So they have this awesome face-off. They hold off the First Order long enough, because all of a sudden there's 2 Jedi on board. All the focus is going to go to defeating them, because Snoke wants Luke Skywalker. That's what he told Rey. Bring me Skywalker, which is, he has what he wants. So therefore Snoke doesn't care about the Rebel fleet. All he wanted was Skywalker. So they defeat, they don't defeat anything. They face off, they hold him off long enough for the Rebel base to escape to the Rebel base. Then Rey and Luke fall back. That is the setup for the final episode. That is where we have Snoke and Kylo Ren as the big baddies. We still don't maybe know who Snoke is. Maybe that comes in later. Maybe he gives Luke a clue, like he's from his past, like it's been a long time since I've seen you. Something like that, where it would have just kept us in it and kept us going, rather than, well, I guess we're just the Rebel Force now. We don't have many of us. So I think instead of that, it would have been great if we had more of, if they used the setups that they had put in the film, if they'd used the resources that they had given themselves to actually pay it off and make us feel satisfied with the ending, if that makes sense.
No, that's fair. I wanted to just make people aware that we're not haters. I know both of us enjoyed the film.
Right. It was nice to see Star Wars on screen.
Yeah, I always enjoy Star Wars on screen. I mean, that's the one thing I said positive about Disney owning Star Wars, is that we get Star Wars every year now instead of having to wait. People waited from 1980s till the early 2000s to see the prequels.
Exactly.
And people hate the prequels, but it was Star Wars on the big screen again. It was, and there's many good things about the prequels if you want to sit down and talk about it, which that's not what this is about. But I agree. The Last Jedi, I think that it could have been 2 movies. Or that they could have at least used a lot of stuff from the end for a second or the 3rd movie. Because I don't know now what's supposed to happen, because there's so few rebels, and they're once again on the run, and once again the Empire's in the exact same position they were at the end of Episode 5.
And I think there are no questions left unanswered.
Right.
The whole point why we were wanting to see The Last Jedi was there were so many questions that just had us on the edge of our seats to see Episode 5 that came from, or not Episode 5, sorry, The Last Jedi, that were set up in The Force Awakens. And so, with that, we don't have any of that. We maybe want to see if Rose wakes up, but I don't really...
I don't care.
I have no emotional attachment to her character, and, I mean, she's going to wake up. Finn woke up, she's going to wake up, Leia woke up, everyone's waking up. Yeah. So, it doesn't really matter. So,
and speaking of waking up, the film also has very many woke moments, which was my least favorite part.
Right. I
think you cut this movie down to about an hour and a half worth of Star Wars moments, and I would enjoy it much better. It's definitely one of my... It's definitely... I don't like ranking the films, 1 through 10 or whatever, but it's definitely not... doesn't hold a candle to the originals, and is kind of in the middle of the prequels, I think. Yeah. I would say that you kind of captured what I felt like. I think that if we're going to watch a 3rd movie in this trilogy, it's going to be a battle between Kylo Ren and Rey, which has happened once, but was very unorthodox. So maybe Rey is going to start a new Jedi Order, or maybe Rey is going to find a balance. I mean, I would have loved to see Kylo and Rey actually become a team and destroy both the Order and the Alliance.
Right.
And start something new. You know, which would have been weird.
Right.
But
it's a new generation of Star Wars.
The thing is, after this film ends, do we know if Finn is even going to stay part of the rebellion? Like, he was ready to give himself, but then the guy on the ship was like, look, both people, you know, pick a side. You don't have to pick a side. The bounty, the traitor. So I think they were trying to make him like some sort of Boba Fett character. I'm sorry. For those of you purists who just cringed, Boba Fett. I think they were trying to make him as a Boba Fett character, where everybody now loves this random guy that showed up out of nowhere. And it's not working for me. No one loves a traitor.
Yeah.
There was nothing about him to love. He had a stutter. Why did he need a stutter?
Right.
And, you know, I don't know. I really don't know what he was supposed to...
Yeah. If he had been anyone else, if he had been a plant by Snoke, if he had been someone from Rogue One that showed up and we were like, whoa, you know, like maybe a rogue, I'm saying this, a rogue, but someone that maybe didn't have a side attachment in Rogue One who was just out for hire, then we had the suspicion, well, has he changed his ways? What's happened since then? You know, anything that could have, and I realized the guy would have to be insanely old if he was from Rogue One, but I mean, Yoda lived for how long?
Yeah, I was going to say Luke's pretty old.
Right, exactly. People are old and he's old, so it would have been cool if we got a little bit of that. But that being said, I did, like David said, I did enjoy the film. I enjoyed the homage of, I know it was, maybe, you know, the pure Star Wars fans will hate me for it, but I liked when I didn't like Leia's arc necessarily, but when she blew open the door and Poe Dameron was there, I thought it was a great homage to Vader's character blowing up and open the door. Like, it was like, oh, the turntables have turned, you know, it was so cool just to see that moment from her, even though she's never used the Force outside of just instinct. I thought her Force usage was a little unexplained, maybe, again, a little unset up. It wasn't paying off anything, which, that's just me. I enjoy setups and payoffs. It's what makes me shake my fist in the movie theater and go, yes, 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 you know, so, because
good things about the film. I really enjoyed the Rebels, like seeing Rebel pilots. Let's put it that way. I really love Rebel pilots for some reason. Their costume design just checks all the buttons for me and ticks all the marks. Like, I love Rebel outfits. Another good thing that I liked was Rey and Kylo, actually, the actors have chemistry.
Right. Yes.
And when they're on screen together, it's great. And their battle together, while confusing because it seemed like the guards were wearing Force-resistant armor but still could be destroyed, was very cool. Like, it was probably the highlight of the movie, I think.
Yeah.
So, plus, Luke plays a grumpy old man. Mark Hamill played that character to the best of his ability. I think you read somewhere that he hated the film, but he did his best. And I think it's good that he won't be in the next one, at least as a live person.
Right.
And plus, honestly, sitting in the theater, I thought to myself, you know, we've never actually seen anyone from the Force come back since Episode 6, and then literally Yoda appeared. And so I was very excited by that, because I was like, of course, this should be a common thing. Like, Obi-Wan talked to Luke a lot. Right. Like, this should be happening more. You know, and I know Luke had been away from the Force. Yeah. So he was just kind of getting back in touch. But, so those were the positives for me. What do you... You have anything else to add?
I think it was, I thought it was fun. I enjoyed seeing the X-Wing in the water. That was a great callback to some classic stuff. I enjoyed seeing, I enjoyed Chewbacca's moments. I wish he'd been in more of the film. I think he could have played a more major role, because this is a man who has just lost his best friend, or not a man, he's a Wookiee. A Wookiee that has just lost his best friend, and he seems very unaffected. He's like, oh, my chicken, oh, like, I don't know what's going to happen to my chicken. And it was like, this is a guy that has just lost a best friend. Like, he should be, maybe not hurting, but, because he's lost a lot of things. He lost Kashyyyk, I don't want him to be an emo hurting character, because that's not Chewbacca, but if he could have at least been, like, I don't know, a little more, like, him and Luke could have just had a little more of a moment. They did, but they did. He was like, but once Luke figured out Han was gone, they both moved on, and it was like, this is a man that they have been through so many things together. But sorry, I'm getting back on the negative. But anyway, oh goodness, I enjoyed Chewbacca in the movie. Whenever he was on screen, he made me laugh, and he was great. But I enjoyed the end fight, like David said. That was a great kind of fight. I enjoyed. Sadly, it was in the trailer, but the red smoke trails from the salt mine. It was. I can see why they used it as the color scheme for the entire movie, because it was the most beautiful part of the film. It was very just aesthetically pleasing.
Well, and it was really striking when the red streaks were on the ground and the First Order's marching in with 2 leaders in black and all the soldiers in white. Like, just the color palette in that section of the movie, I was very emotionally conflicted at that point, but when they marched in, I was like, oh wow, this is really pretty. Like, I could only focus on how good it looked.
Yeah. And I think that was cool. And I also I liked Luke Skywalker emerging from the blown hole in the door, you know, like that was cool. Like, I'm gonna go face off with them, because I think that seeing Luke show up and emerge from things is kind of like really fun. Like when he shows up at Jabba's palace and he just kind of walks in, you're like, whew, he's a force, you know, and he was in that too. And so I thought that was a cool scene.
Yeah. Well, switching gears to an entirely different genre, another movie Mark saw Star Wars last night, and then the night before that we both saw a movie we've touched on earlier in the pod, and we were wrong about a couple things.
Right, we just did a pre-review based on trailers and articles.
Because we hadn't seen it yet. We were waiting to see it together, and we recorded that pod a couple months ago now, I think. But we went and saw Coco.
Yep.
And the whole family saw Coco. And I loved Coco, I believe, even more so now that you should take your kids to see it. Now, obviously, for those of you who have seen it or haven't seen it and listen to the pod, the child's name is not Coco. His name is Miguel. His grandmother's name is Coco.
Yeah, before we go any further, David, again, spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. I'm going to try not to talk too much about the ending because I want people to be impacted by it. I was emotionally distraught during Star Wars. I was emotionally broken during Coco. I cried right when they wanted me to, and then I cried again later. So I am not ashamed to say that Pixar can move me like that, because that is their intent and that is literally what they're good at. But I was also, ashamed to say it, but I love being able to predict movies, and Pixar movies never allow me to predict them. I think Mark and I were both a little off throughout the movie until it was revealed, or at least until close to the reveal. What the big twist was. And so I enjoy movies like that, and I would love to actually go see Coco again in theaters, just because it's also a very gorgeous movie. The way that they've captured the way to animate light is just second to none in this movie, I think, specifically, and as opposed to movies I've seen from them in the past. I think A Good Dinosaur, they were getting there with the light and the landscapes and everything. But Coco, they just really nailed light, and I don't know. Pixar just did a good job with the animation and the beauty.
Yeah, I would compare, like, The Good Dinosaur to me was like Dunkirk for Christopher Nolan. It's a film where they experimented with technical things, and the plot just did what it needed to, you know. But with Coco, I thought, again, like David said, it was very beautiful. Pixar always pushes the boundaries, and with that film they pushed like the city where the Day of the Dead was, the layering of everything, and it's so good because they put story first. They don't say, look at this beautiful thing that we've done. It's look at this beautiful thing that helps tell the story, that enhances the experience. You know, it doesn't distract at all, it just enhances. And I loved it. I thought the characters were interesting. The creative solution to making skeletons look Pixar appealing, handled beautifully. I love the face paint and the markings on them. It really helped just accent their characters, accent the culture, things like that.
Yeah, I thought of that during the movie. I was like, wow, if they had done this differently, this would be a very creepy movie.
Right, it should have been released around Halloween if it wasn't well done.
You think it's like Christmas...
Nightmare Before Christmas.
Nightmare Before Christmas, which is a classic, but still very creepy. But this is not, like, at no point in time, unless there's actually something bad happening, are you afraid or frightened.
Right, yeah. There's a moment at the very beginning where or it's right where the transition happens that you're like, oh, it just wells up inside of you like, this is scary when he first enters the world. But then all of a sudden you run into the uncle and his head pops off, and then it's just laughter and fun from then on.
And Pixar does a great job of keeping you balanced in your emotions until the right moment.
Right,
you know, they don't throw you into an unnecessary emotion before, you know, like they'll build you up, but then they'll throw you into one you're not expecting. Oh, humor? Wait a minute, these skeletons are funny?
Right.
You know, and then they kind of roll with it like that, and then they do that kind of throughout the film. They'll build you up, and then they'll throw you into one, and then they'll build it up a little bit longer, and then they'll build to the climax, and then it's all just kind of a downhill slope from there. But yeah, good things about Coco. I think we've touched on most of them, but I mean, the animation is beautiful. I think it's good for us to find out more about other cultures.
Right, yeah.
This was a great glimpse into Hispanic culture, something that they celebrate. Obviously, we don't agree with it spiritually, but it's a good thing to have in mind if you were to actually make friends with a Spanish person or something like that. Maybe not be like, so, you celebrate Day of the Dead, but if they say, hey, we're celebrating Dios de los Muertos, then you kind of know, at least from a very basic...
Right.
And this gives people a chance to, number one, look into Dios... I'm not going to be able to say it. The Day of the Dead, you know, and research it a little better for themselves, because maybe they have a Hispanic friend they can ask about it. And number two, once again, like we mentioned previously in the casts, it gives us a chance to start talking about death.
Right.
And kind of exploring those themes with children or with anyone, and talking about, because for them, at least in this story, I don't know if this is strictly Hispanic culture that they've taken and used, or if it's just specific to Coco, but when you pass away, you go to an afterworld, and then if someone forgets you, then you disappear, and we don't know what happens after that.
Right.
And so it's a good way to just get people to start thinking about what happens after that, and then it gives you an open door.
And I think that, like, if you take it at a more surface level, like what Pixar was trying to do was not necessarily promote Dios de los Muertos.
Right.
It's like this thing that should be celebrated by all and should be lifted
up. No, I never got that.
Right, exactly. It was they used this tool in their belt that they had to tell a specific story and enforce a certain theme, which was remember people. Don't remember where you're from, remember who your family is, put family first. And they used the Day of the Dead and that whole thing to tell that story, but I didn't get that they were pushing that culture in any way or forcing it upon us to practice it ourselves or anything like that. I thought it was good, like, just... And Pixar does this a lot. They want you to remember where you're from. They want you to remember where you came from. It's a theme in a lot of their movies. And I just want to give a plug. If you watch this film, I would encourage you to go back and watch Inside Out and look at some of the mirrored plot development. You won't find the same characters, but if you find that same kind of mirrored plot development, and then Coco does a great thing and it builds on it and it shifts and it goes a different direction, which is awesome. But again, a film about remembering. You know, you have the character, the long-lost childhood character that is afraid he'll be forgotten. And you have the same thing there. Things being afraid they'll be forgotten. And it was just a great reminder to me because, in all honesty, our grandpa just passed away very recently on my mom's side. And it was a good reminder to me. It hit me right where I lived. Like, hey, remember him. Remember his legacy. Remember what he did for our family, how he contributed. And... it was just that was what I got out of the film, was not to celebrate the Day of the Dead, but to remember people that have impacted me. And so I appreciated what Pixar did in that respect.
Yeah. If you haven't noticed from listening to the episode so far, as we've mentioned before, story is important to us. And both of these movies had stories, and I think both of these movies handled story differently.
Right.
And of the two movies we've seen this weekend, we liked Coco better, simply because of the way the story was handled. And just so everyone out there knows, Coco is not strictly for children. Like, please do not stay home from seeing Coco simply because you don't have small children.
Right.
Or if it's at least get it on Redbox or buy it, find a friend that has it on Blu-ray or something. We'll have it on Blu-ray. Both of us.
Yeah.
Find us. Yeah, find us. And speaking of finding us, great segue, Mark.
Thank you.
We now have a Facebook page, along with our Twitter. It's called Destination Arete. I noticed that 90% of the website traffic to destinationarete.net was coming from Facebook, the mobile app. So I figured let's give the people what they want.
Right.
So I created a Facebook page. So follow that for more info and to stay up to date with us. Also, if you're watching this episode on the Pink Hoodie YouTube channel, you might have noticed Mark's hat. Mark, show the camera. This is a knit or crochet?
I think it's knit.
Knit hat, Santa hat. He actually got a compliment from an older lady today already. And we wanted to thank Jeriah for making this hat. Jeriahh on Instagram. So go follow him.
It sounds like Jeriah.
Yes,
That's what it
yes,
sounds like.
yes. Jeriah. Jeriahh.
Right.
Go follow him and maybe give him a follow and a like and persuade him to make more of these.
Right.
Because
Exactly.
Jeriah, if you're watching, I want one in this color. Okay, bright red. His is a more muted, which is good for him.
Right.
But I need a bright red one to kind of match this hat. And then if you're also watching on the Pink Hoodie YouTube channel, you might have noticed Mark's face is shaped a little bit different. You can watch the channel in coming days to see how his face ended up so swollen. The Pink Hoodie channel is a big friend of the show and the source for all Destination Arete video content. We haven't started a YouTube channel yet because we don't feel like that's a main thing we'll be doing. But when we start doing more live casts,
right? Because we're not in the same location usually, so there's no point in us filming videos of ourselves. And
I'm sure we'll put a couple videos up just so you can kind of get more exposure to the podcast and. And so we shouted out Jeriah, Mark. We talked about watching the show. Jeriah's info we'll post it on the website, and we'll post it in the YouTube links.
Yeah, he's a great graphic designer. Check out his stuff. It's really good.
Yeah, and he's a big friend of both the Pink Hoodie and Destination Arete. And then I wanted to shout out one more listener, Mark. David has been texting me almost after every episode. His Instagram is Faith Baptist Students. Faith Baptist Students, all one word. He's a youth pastor in Ohio. Go check him out. They post some pretty fun stuff, and I know that the page is kind of more for their friends, but he posts some good spiritual things as well, and inspirational, that sort of thing. So I want to thank David for listening, and no, that's not me. I just
different
like
David.
Yeah, different David. But we want to thank you guys for watching or listening, whichever one you're doing. Once again, you can find this podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes. You can find it on destionationarete.net once it goes up. You can watch this whole episode on YouTube. We got a special 3-camera setup, and I know we haven't addressed that camera much, but I think it'll be okay. We want to thank Amy for helping us, Amy for helping us produce this episode, and we will see you guys next time around. Mark, we're probably going to record one more episode this week.
Yeah, probably.
And we'll get that one up eventually. And episode 4 of the podcast should be coming early in the Christmas week too. So wishing you all a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and we will see you next time around.